I think we are live. Am I audible, Georgia?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Very good evening to everyone. Uh, Here we are again. It's time to celebrate the Pride Month. Today, we will celebrate self affirmation, dignity, and equality. Through this, we are going to spread the message of the rights of LGBTQ community. It's not just about the LGBT community, it's all about us. Pride Month is dedicated to the LGBTQ community, and it is all about people coming together and celebrating love. Discussion about how far the community has come, honoring the struggles people have gone through, encouraging being comfortable in one's own skin. Pride Month is all about this. To sum it up, it's a celebration of LGBTQ queer community. Now the question, why do we celebrate Pride Month? Actually, it all started with a riot in 1969, the Stonewall riots that changed everything for the queer community. It was June 28th. Was a day everything changed when while one of the most popular gay bars, Greenwich Village's Stonewall Inn was raided as usual by the New York police. The raids were a common thing. The police would arrive at queer bars and harass the people. But something interesting happened on June 28th, something unusual, something unprecedented. June 28th was yet another such day, but it all changed when people decided to fight back. Yes, you heard me right. They fought back and history was created. The community protested hard for several days. They protested against the American Constitution, which had laws banning homosexuality and discrimination towards queer people. The protest started a trend that is still very prevalent. The first official Pride parade was carried out after a year on the same day to mark the anniversary of the Stonewall riots. The tradition has continued to the present day. Now, now let's not separate ourselves. We need to create an environment suitable for us, just honest. Let's be acquainted with the term human, not with the term men and women. With this vision, I would like to invite our first performer of the program, Mrs. Jalsa Chandra and her team. Srimati Jalsa Chandra is a fellow from Ministry of Culture, Nritya Praveen, gold medalist, choreographer, teacher and performer of Indian classical art. She is a social worker and an animal activist as well. She has performed in various dance festivals across India and abroad. She is a fellow Ministry of Culture and panel artist of ICCR, Ministry of Culture, Festival of India and Abroad, solo with group, Eastern Zonal Culture Center and Doordarshan Kolkata and associated the West Bengal State Music Academy. Yeah, here we Jolsha. So what do you, Jolsha?
Yeah, hello, good evening, namaste, everybody. First of all, I think I should thank this Facebook page, Famki Baat, for bringing up this topic and celebrating this. I think this is something that is part of us. It is not something that is to be celebrated maybe. But we consider this the month of June as the Pride Month, and so celebrating this, and for that I have been invited today. As we know, as a classical dancer, we have thought of this for this presentation. We have thought of presenting Ardhanarishwara from the Indian mythology. We know that bisexuality is not something that is today's. It is something from the past. It is something which has been a very integral part of our culture, our spiritualism as well. Shiva, Vishnu, all the gods has their counterparts, their half man, half woman bodies, and even Vishnu had come as Mohini, which was the female Rupa. Today we will be presenting Ardhanarishvara, which, as the word means, it's the composite androgynous form of Shiva and his consort Parvati. The very name Ardhanarishvara implies the god who is half woman. The right half is depicted as Shiva and the left half as Parvati. Since Ardhanarishvara represents the perfect synthesis of the male and the female forms, it also embodies the Prakriti and the Purusha, the masculine and the feminine part of nature, the feminine and the masculine energies of the cosmos, and also illustrates how Shakti and the sacred feminine is inseparable from Shiva, the main principle of God. This form also symbolizes the all pervasive, all enduring nature of Lord Shiva. This stotram describes this Ardhanarishvara beauty of Shiva, where he is on one side smeared with ashes, on the other he is smeared with musk and kasturi. His beauty as he wears the snake on his right and the beautiful bangles on his left. It goes on further, he who shines as with camphor, and she who is brightly lit with as the molten gold. This presentation is by our group, performed by Arunima Mukherjee, Audrija Mondol, Shreya Dasgupta, and myself, Joyce Chandra. The music has been composed. We have been taken the music from YouTube, and choreography by myself, Kimberly Joyce Chandra. Our presentation for this Pride Month for Funky Bud Ardhanarishvara Stotra.
चापेय गौरार्थ शरीरकाय चापेय गौरार्थ शरीरकाय कर्पूर गौरार्थ शरीरकाय कर्पूर गौरार्थ शरीरकाय तमिलकाय च जटाधराय तमिलकाय च जटाधराय नमः शिवाय च नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय च नमः शिवाय विकासि पङ्गेरुह लोचनाय समेक्षणायै विषमेक्षणाय नमः शिवायै च नमः शिवाय नमः शिवायै च नमः शिवाय नमः शिवायै च नमः शिवाय अम्भोधर श्यामल प्रणायै प्रतिप्रभाताम्र जटाधराय अम्भोधर श्यामल प्रणायै प्रतिप्रभाताम्र जटाधराय ईटीश्वरायै निखिलेश्वराय ईटीश्वरायै निखिलेश्वराय नमः शिवायै च नमः शिवाय अम्बोधर श्यामल कुण्डलायै प्रतिप्रभाताम्र जटाधराय निखिलेश्वराय नमः शिवायै च नमः शिवाय गरि गरि सरि ग सरि ग गरि गरि सरि ग सरि ग प ग प नि प गरि सरि ग गरि सरि ग सरि ग प ग प नि प गरि सरि ग प नि सरि सरि ग प सरि 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 प ग सरि प गरि ग प ग प नि प ग प नि सरि सरि ग ग प नि गरि सा मन्दारमाला कलितालकायै कपालमालाकित कन्धराय मन्दारमाला कलितालकायै कपालमालाकित कन्धराय दिव्यापरायै च दिगम्बराय दिव्यापरायै च दिगम्बराय नमः शिवायै च नमः शिवाय मन्दारमाला कलितालकायै कपालमालाकित कन्धराय दिव्याम्बरायै च दिगम्बराय नमः शिवायै च नमः शिवाय प्रपञ्च सृष्टुं मुखलास्यधाय मस्त संहारक तांडवायै प्रपञ्च लास्यसायै सर्वस्वसंहारक ताण्डवायै जगज्जनन्यै जगदेकवीरे जगज्जनन्यै जगदेकवीरे नमः शिवायै नमः शिवाय
Thank you so much, Jalsa ma'am and her team. It was such a wonderful performance. As always, we have seen this kind of performance last year also, and we got mesmerized. And today also we got totally spellbound by your performance and your team. And a big round of applause for you and your team. I hope in future you will come
Thank you.
and uh, show your talent on this platform and in person also, if possible.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now, okay. Now we have come to the final section of our presentation of our performance today, and our next presentation will be on tolerance and inclusivity by Gabriela Nikidieva. She is a clinical professor in the Department of Middle Eastern and Islamic Studies at New York University. She was awarded with the Dr. George Grierson Award for promoting Hindi language in 2015 by the Honorable President of India. In 2017, she was awarded with the prestigious Hindi Sevi Samman Award by the Honorable President of India, Mr. Pranab Mukherjee. She is passionate about exploring the ways language encodes certain socio-cultural meanings. Specifically, she examines the structures of discourse in Hindi and Sanskrit literature that produce or challenge gender-based relation of power and dominance in Indian society. She also analyzes the formulation of gender self-identity as a dynamic process through which Indian social contexts are actively constructed by applying the so-called doing oblique performing gender approach. In one of her publications named Common Representations of Women and Men, sorry, in the Rig Veda, she focuses on words in relative isolation and their relationship to words within the discourse of phrases, sentences, and broad contexts, as their semantics make up the whole gender representation. Now, tolerance is a value at the heart of strong societies. It is the glue that prevents communities from falling apart. It promotes inclusivity and peaceful coexistence. And today we will explore the need to understand how tolerance and inclusivity relate. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining with us. Now, I would like to formally invite Gabriela, ma'am, and give the virtual space to her. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Can you hear me fine? It's not? Yes? No? Maybe?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
You're
good.
right.
So please confirm that you see also my screen. So we're going to do this. And I want to be sure that you see my screen. Everyone fine with it? Yes, no?
Yes, ma'am. It is
Okay,
visible.
good. So thank you, everyone. This is a first time for me to participate in this kind of event. I congratulate you for having it, for organizing it. And apparently this is not the first time. I am not a specialist in gender as formulated outside of the binary men-women. My research has been on Sanskrit and the way, as you mentioned, and the way men and women are represented in different ways. On the one hand, in terms of their presentation in terms of lexics, but then also in terms of their discourse as represented in hymns that are dialogues, also in hymns that are monologues, how they identify themselves and how they exercise their own gender. But we're going to talk about something different. And it was a challenge. I tried to not agree to talk to you, but then I thought, why not? I'm going to talk to you based on my experience in Europe and in the States. I don't know a lot about what is going on in India, except for the kind of research that Kira Hall does with hijras, for example, and already. But I'm still quite new to the specific context in India, let alone where you are. Although this is an online forum, so who knows where all of you are. Now, I'm going to talk to you about the lavender contexts. The lavender sort of color has been used quite a lot recently instead of rainbow to relate to a community that is difficult to identify, but is not the patriarchal type of description or matriarchal type of description of men and women. So it's a different kind of community, and that community, because it's very diverse, has become more visible in recent years and has in a way generated some interest beyond the pure, let's say, policy making or government social worker type of interest, beyond that in academia. And now lavender, I'm going to touch on that today about lavender linguistics and lavender languages. But I'm going to start with, of course, with what inclusion is. And we talk about inclusion, we talk about diversity, we also talk about equity. So right now in the United States in particular, more than let's say in Europe, we say diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it's becoming an acronym, DEI. So I'm gonna equity is more about the economic access to economic resources. So I'm not gonna pay attention to that so much, although it's as important as the other two terms. But I decided not to go there because of time limitation. So inclusion, we define it as a relational construct because it is about how a community functions. It is about what the connections within the community are, and also it is about how the community performs in these connections, in these interactions. It's about whether they're open to learning or not. It's about the agility. It's about the depth of decision making. And then here we're trying to always be aware that the relevance to the concept of inclusion of the LGBTQ community always goes at least in the civil, political, social, and cultural contexts. And in the social and the civil and the political, we always need to keep in mind also the health sphere. So when we talk about inclusion, this is how we talk about it. This is what we mean. Now, diversity. It's a little bit more multidimensional because it can be seen from inside and from outside. It's about the new globally ever-changing realities. The world is becoming more complex. And even though you might be an insider of a particular place, in that place there are outsiders as well. So this type of additional layering of the diversity is what we need to be very aware of. Nothing is monolithic anymore. And we are far more aware as post-Orientalists in the West that there is no monolithic culture, especially when we talk about South Asia and India in particular. When we talk about diversity, the first way of defining it is usually gender, culture, race, ethnicity, possibly age, possibly education, possibly occupation. But it's become quite paradigmatic, and it hasn't allowed us to think out of the box. Diversity, if we define it as a way of understanding cultures in a very broad sense, where the cultures have products, practices, and perspectives, meaning some ideas and concepts are also included there. So multiculturalism could be the sort of the way we understand diversity. But it is still using a sort of a way of defining the matter that is, again, paradigmatic. Because how do you define culture? The cultures we define are patriarchic, usually. The cultures we define have already been the subject of analysis. So it's, again, getting us to think within certain frames. And we don't want these frames when we're talking about a community that has been identified and self-identifies as something that is outside of the type of frames that we've lived with until the 20th century. Then we start thinking about diversity in a little bit of a different way, as an actual approach, acknowledgement or approach to the fact that there is a dynamic process of identity creation, that nothing is static, that everything is dynamic, that everything is changing, and we need, by acknowledging it, we need to examine exactly the individual's responsibilities, the individual's understanding of how they understand choice and what freedom is about choice, right? So in this sense, when we open up a little bit more the sort of the old frameworks, then we're like, diversity is anything at any point, anywhere, any point in time, any point in place, right? So then we start thinking, why is it so complex? Why is diversity becoming a reality that, although there are these forces that are against the acknowledgement of this reality, still they have to acknowledge it. Why? Because we have a very complex 21st century. We have tradition and modernity working sort of together, interacting with each other, one more understood as an economic force and the other one more understood as a cultural force. And the beginning of this event is an excellent example, illustration of what tradition means in terms of a cultural force, and how it sort of works along with society, it works along with politics, it works along with identity. Identity is what is in the middle, and identity is what actually has become the center of these sort of forces and these correlatives that are in a very And I have just quickly here the context of modernity and tradition. Is it theoretical abstraction or is it experiential reality? And of course, it's both, because modernity functions as an economic and social tool to achieve some wealth, flexibility, and innovation for individuals and groups. And a very immediate example of modernity is the English use of language, of English language in the society that you live in. And it is an economic force with social, cultural, and political correlatives, of course. Tradition, on the other hand, functions partly, at times, largely as a mythological state. And we just heard about Ardhanarishvar. We heard about those mythological sort of conceptualizations that allow us to think in a way that is neither patriarchic nor matriarchic, which produces the sensation of larger connectedness and stability in the face of shockingly massive social change over the last half century. And it is a cultural force with its own social, economic, and political correlatives. So here we are celebrating a month of pride, a month of self-discovery, a month of visibility, a month of acknowledgement, a month of something that is relatively new. The community of, and by the way, I know that in many references, Q at the end of LGBTQ is considered to represent queerness. However, I have a few links in this presentation. It will stay with you for those that are interested. The organizers of the event will have it available. The Q recently has been added to sort of denote questioning, so that queer as an umbrella term sort of becomes diminished, and everything that is that, for example, includes asexuality, non-binary type of self-identification, and so forth, would be included in this queue. So why do we have to pay attention to this community, or to these communities, quite diverse communities? It's because we want to be a part of democratic way of thinking, because in democratic societies, it's about human rights, it's about it's about freedom of expression, and it's about the sort of the opportunities that are there and the gains because of these opportunities to be equitably for all in all the sectors of the life of the society, in the political, educational, health, and economic sector, right? So in this sense, that's why we need to pay attention, because we're talking about democratic conceptualization of human rights and freedom of expression, and they're a part of us, and they're a part of everyone who needs to have all the opportunities. So it is about also long-standing systematic and structural discrimination that has existed and still exists, unfortunately. And it's about inequities in education and healthcare and politics and economy. And these inequities, they hinder prosperity. And as a democratic society, we would like everyone to be prosperous. So we need to pay attention to a group that hasn't been paid attention to. Another reason is because these inequities and these debilitating norms have created a specific need. And that need is for a safe environment, for safety nets. Why? Because this community, we know from its own history, from the way they, even until today, across the world, exercise their identity, that they suffer. And everyone who suffers needs to belong to a group, and that group needs to create a particular safety environment. It's all about acceptance. It's all about tolerance. It's all about inclusiveness. And it's all about feeling the feeling of belonging. Because that brings self-empowerment. That brings independence. And that brings the sort of the self confidence that gives the sort of the skills to use the opportunities, to gain certain wealth, to gain education, to do the things in order to be prosperous. So these are sort of the main three reasons why we have such events, why we need to draw attention towards the LGBTQ community. Now, if we pay attention and if we are a part of something, what are the implications? What does that mean? Well, it will mean that we will understand the perceptual, institutional, psychological, and linguistic processes which impact the ways LGBTQ people interact. By understanding them, it makes us a better society. It makes us better partners. It makes us better policymakers, decision makers. It makes us better educators, etc., etc., managers, etc., etc. The implications are that we need to participate in this effort where LGBTQ and all people will gain and retain consistently their civil rights and freedoms. They are creating these safe spaces of acceptance and tolerance. These are the implications. We need to be a part of that effort as well. And not only that, but I'm an narratologist. I believe in creating narratives. And these narratives need to be of inclusivity and tolerance. But I don't believe in labeling. And this is where the question is. How do we do that? So when we talk about challenges in education, when we know the LGBTQ community and their issues and their everyday sort of concerns and achievements, we're thinking of how do we help in order for them to have a better well-being, and in education, how to have better academic outcomes. Well, we need to create these comprehensive policies of inclusiveness. We need to train supportive educators. We need to modify the curriculum to make it inclusive by distinguishing between the course design and the course delivery, because in both aspects, the modifications of the curriculum is possible. And then, in addition, we need to create ideas for how do we facilitate, how do we mentor student-led initiatives for better climate? How do we avoid unnecessary labeling and classification? So all these are the challenges in education that we are dealing with. I have this slide, again, it will go to you. I really like, this is a very concise glossary for who and what related to the lavender field. But what I'm mostly interested, and I've been kind of following in the last, maybe I would say decade, not much more, there is the emergence of this field, which is an interdisciplinary field, challenging the conceptualization of ideological horizons of homogeneity. As we mentioned, nothing is monolithic, nothing is static, but linguistics in particular is a kind of field that creates norms, creates these sort of descriptions and these molds and patterns that actually promote homogeneity rather than diversity. So this is something that has been emerging in the last decade. Of course, pretty much starting with queer linguistics and moving on to defining it as a broader and more maybe euphemistic term. A focus for multiple directions of inquiry based on embracing diversity. This hasn't been the case for the type of analysis and research in the field of linguistics for quite some time. So the lavender linguistics is exactly identifying all these possibilities which did not exist before, acknowledging the insider and the outsider sort of perspective, the sort of the heterolinguality and homolinguality of these communities. Also, examination of the relationship between language, gender, and sexuality, but at the same time generating research theories and methods related to the LGBTQ community. In addition, what we've observed so far, and the field is wide open because it's very new, we see that the scope is focused on language, sexuality, and regulatory practices of inclusiveness, and how is that possible? Again, about global circulation of language and sexuality, and even we're thinking about the local resistance for globalizing formations, against stereotyping, against labeling, and against, in a way, outsiders' imposition of ideas and way of conceptualizing local phenomena. And then we have various infusions of language and sexuality into emerging forms of super diversity in context of displacement, diaspora, and resettlements worldwide. So you can see how this is the sort of a global scope of the lavender linguistics. At the same time, of course, they're a little bit framed a little bit more traditionally, how difference is used in theories of language, including those semiotic, psychoanalysis, cognitive linguistics, in terms of the gender performativity theory. A lot of research is done. How another sort of direction, how to conduct non-normative, non-linear linguistic inquiry. which is not easy, again, because of the sheer history that we have with linguistics. And then how people draw on semiotic resources to address sexuality, desire, and identity in the LGBTQ community is another direction of analysis. How LGBTQ people use language and embody signs to communicate things about their identities that are different from the way these signs were encoded with their gender meanings in the cisnormative way, in the patriarchic or patriarchic usually societies. Ethical and practical issues in the ethnographical approach of language, gender, and sexuality in lavender contexts. So this is this is the scope of this newly emerging field of study that in the West there is plenty of interest and plenty of research being conducted as we speak. Here are a few sources that I thought you might be interested to look at. A little bit about the history of lavender linguistics or lavender studies. We don't know what we're going to end up saying in 10 years from now or in 20 years from now. And then there is this diversity and equity inclusion in education link, the second one, which actually gives you very hands-on strategies and ideas for how to include this additional perspective or how to be diverse and inclusive in our curricula and education. And then at the end, this is a European, this is actually the biggest in the world organization representing the rights of the LGBT, and they say QI because they are extending the term a little bit. So this is also a place that you might be interested to look at. Now, I wanted to give you an example of what it means to be aware, what it means to be inclusive, what it means to realize that we have to be careful, especially when we are rendering certain terminology and concepts to some extent into a different set of practices and cultural perspectives and cultural products. And we mentioned, our first speaker mentioned Ardhanareshwar, which is beautiful because we're talking about non-binary. And here we have the binary, the female and the male beginning, and we're going even beyond that. And we have plenty of sort of mythological sort of formations of characters that can cover quite a lot of the field of LGBTQI community. So my point here is when you I guess a lot of you have read Lihaf by Ismet Chughtai. And the reason why I'm bringing up here is how to implement or how to sort of start thinking differently. One way is, okay, we take the labels and we say, okay, the story is about a lesbian relationship. Because a woman who is married to a homosexual has a relationship with her masseuse, and the young narrator observes certain acts. But it's easy. It's nice. It's doable. Can we stretch it? Well, maybe we can if we use another label. Maybe it's bisexuality, because the main character of this story actually was a real person, and when Chughtai met her some years later, she already had a second husband because she divorced the rich Nawab, who was a homosexual, and had married someone else, and had a child, I think a beautiful son, that Chughtai in her letter said, I kind of looked at him as if he was, I considered him my own son, because she had written about this woman, Lihaf, the story. And so we can label her this way. Another way to go about it is say, okay, what if we don't label? What if this is a South Asian specific set of practices and perspectives? What if just intimacy is missing? What if we're talking about fluidity in sexuality? What if we don't label? Then we can think about everything differently. There's no harm in labeling, and it's needed in order to create these spaces, safety spaces for people who self-identify in a particular way. But it stretches us as educators to think even beyond these labels. And I was talking to my daughter, who is working on something very different, but she let me know about the looping effect of humankind. And it's a very interesting, I would say, approach to how certain way of classification by, let's say, social scientists can create these spaces where people would want to fit, but then they might not be sure, they might not think independently this way, and then they become that, which might be limiting, which might be framing. And all we're talking about is let's not frame ourselves. And in the introduction, you said, let's not talk about men and women or whoever, we're just human. And that's exactly what this article is about in terms of the risk of labeling and looping. So another example I wanted to give you is, so this is the first example of how we implement, what we do when we know, what we do when we think, what we do when we consider, when we are concerned with. Another example is what happened at NYU. NYU had a very interesting history of very high international community that was sort of the profile. It defined the profile of the university, but there was no structure to support them. So it started with the internationalization of the school, but then the diversity issue did not have any structural, any systematic sort of way of support. So the students themselves demanded it. And you can see in the website itself, it comes from the president's office. They said, you demanded and we listened. And then they created this Office of Global Inclusion, Diversity, and Strategic Innovation. So this is at the administrative level. And then we have another example. You can examine this link later. It's about modifying Hindi language pedagogy. It's about particular ideas for how to make sure that we include a diverse set of authentic texts to use to base our lesson plans on, how we are thinking of the processes while teaching. So this is the sort of the materials, the processes, how we are making sure that we are including everyone, and while teaching, how we're giving examples that are not going to cover only one type of sort of human behavior, but more diverse. And then, of course, in terms of the products that the students create, how they could be given and should be given different type of choice. Now, it goes even further, this site, it might be interesting for you, that it suggests the way, for example, in the West, those languages that allow it, where the pronoun is relevant, he, she versus Z versus XI, and versus, let's say, air and so forth. There are plenty of innovations and personal choices with these innovations for how they express themselves. But here in this Hindi grammar, the idea is क्योंकि ये वो तो नहीं चलेगा, ये वे उसमें लिंग का फर्क नहीं है. So because there is no difference, so the idea is, let's say, the verb form, the ending at the end, gives us this information about gender. Like there is bolti hai versus bolti thi versus bolta tha, either or. And then the idea is bolto tho, so that bolto hai, bolto tho, so that the o will be this sort of default universal ending, where you would sort of avoid the identification of whether a female or a male is the referent. So, this is another example of what it means to be aware and what it means to want to be a part of an effort to make changes. Thank you. I will stop here. I think speaking to my slides without seeing your faces and your reactions is a little bit difficult, but I hope I was able to sort of let you know my thoughts in a clear way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gabriela ji, for giving your valuable time right early in the morning in your place. And whatever is wrong with your hand, what happened?
Oh, only God knows. I don't know. I just woke up and it hurt. So nothing really wrong.
Okay, so I just wish it did not come down upon anybody's head, because you have you're on mute.
This is bandage. It's nothing hard. Don't worry.
Okay, all right. So thank you so much again for giving your valuable time. And who said that you are not an expert on these issues? Because I learned when I was under your supervision in NYU that you said that you don't need to be one to empathize with one. You don't have to be an expert to empathize with people who are different and are suffering because of that. And truly, the condition in India and in Kolkata also, whereas the government, the politics around it is kind of ambivalent towards them, but the social attitudes have not changed at all. I mean, a hijra is still a term of abuse. If you call a man a hijra, then you are questioning his masculinity. Whereas my personal experience with the transgenders particularly is that I am scared of them. When I see them, I feel afraid, because I think that they would do the same to me as I do to women. And that is the source of this psychosis and this problem with the so-called heteronormative society with the non-binaries. So I just want to express my gratitude to you for being here, and the listeners are really very happy. Their reactions come in the Facebook live thing, which you cannot see, unfortunately. But of course, I will try to communicate whatever they have been saying these things to you personally, because we have a kind of a recording and a screenshot thing. So thank you again for for being here, and namaste. So you may wish to, if you wish to, you may leave the studio now. Thank you so much.